Hello and welcome to my channel, Rhino here. Today I'm looking at a video by Dave Early, which is titled Atheism Number 1. So it's obviously going to be him with a big foam finger talking about how awesome atheism is, because it gives you the freedom to figure out morality for yourself instead of trying to force you to conform to the moral code laid out in a book written by people who thought that owning slaves was an okay thing to do. Right?
Do you realize in the Western world that several years ago, 1 out of 10 Americans identified themselves as either an atheist, an agnostic, or a spiritual nothing?
I'm pretty sure that the people that you have decided here to call spiritual nothings might take issue with that wording. Religiously unaffiliated people would be a more appropriate term. A lot of the people in that category would consider themselves to be spiritual, but not religious.
Recently, that number had increased to 1 out of 4.
Yep. And I could optimistically look at that increase in religious non-affiliation and call it a victory, and in a way it is, but at the end of the day, self-identified atheists are up from 2% in 1991 to 3.1% as of 2014. That's not a huge increase, though that is only self-described atheists. I could claim that the number is around 9% because that's how many people agreed with the statement, "I do not believe in God," and no matter how you define atheist, that is kind of what it all breaks down to. Do you think atheism is a lack of belief in a god or gods? Well, someone who says, "I do not believe in God," is an atheist. Do you think atheism is a positive claim that no god or gods exist? Then someone who says, "I do not believe in God," is an atheist. But only 3.1% of people are willing to actually call themselves atheists. Seems like we've got some pretty severe negative stigma to overcome. But also worth mentioning is that this is American data. These numbers will vary by region, sometimes quite significantly.
Atheism is a fast-growing belief system in our country.
Not fast enough, given the data.
What is atheism? Well, that's what we're going to talk about the next few days. The dictionary defines it as no belief in the existence of God or gods.
It depends on the dictionary, but I can accept that definition, though I also have to believe that he can't have looked at the whiteboard, read that definition from it, and not noticed the glaring typo. Is it a typo when it's handwritten? No belief is existence of God/gods. But yeah, you could have stopped the camera and fixed it before moving on. Just saying.
And it's becoming very popular. For example, one of our more popular actors, George Clooney, said, "I don't believe in heaven or hell, and I don't believe in God. All I know is that I won't allow this life to be wasted."
Good. We need more prominent public figures to make statements like that. It helps with the whole destigmatization thing. But for every one George Clooney willing to make a statement like that, you have a bunch of others getting up and thanking God for making sure they win an award.
First off, I want to thank God.
Because a God who intervenes to make sure a specific entertainer is adequately recognized while refusing to intervene to make sure all the children of the world are adequately fed is surely a good God, right?
His buddy Brad Pitt, also a famous actor.
I like how you feel the need to point out that Brad Pitt and George Clooney are famous actors. Like, they are. It's just funny to me that you feel the need to point it out.
Said, "I'm probably 20% atheist, 80% agnostic. I don't think anybody really knows."
Now, that is not the kind of statement that we need more of. I mean, at least he was willing to use the dreaded atheist label, at least to account for 20%. Not sure how you can really be 20% atheist. I only believe in 80% of a god, the other 20% doesn't exist for sure. Oh, I'm sorry, his 80% was agnostic, so I'm not sure if 80% of a god exists, but 20% of it doesn't exist for sure. This is the kind of thing that creates extra confusion.
You'll either find out or not when you get there. Until then, there's no point thinking about it.
I disagree that there's no point thinking about it, but I can also perfectly understand how people might just want to go about their lives and not worry about the God of the Bible, just as Christians go about their lives without worrying about Zeus or Allah or Vishnu or leprechauns, etc. It's about priorities, I guess. Just try to be aware that it is not a given that everyone takes your religion seriously or at face value, and that's okay. If you can't overcome the incredibly minor question of why I should even bother taking yours seriously but not others, then you don't really deserve to be taken seriously.
Well, I disagree. I disagree with all those statements.
Obviously. Now explain why I should disagree as well.
You can know that there is a God, and you better think about it now because it will make a big difference in your daily life as well as your eternal existence.
So, we should take you seriously because if we don't, then we'll regret it when we're dead. And as a former Christian, I can tell you it didn't make a huge difference in my life. Except when I was a Christian, I wasted a lot more of my life doing church-related stuff, and I wasted a lot of money giving to the church when I didn't really have enough money to live on myself. And the church never actually did anything to help me when I was in financial need, despite the fact that I did everything I could to prop it up financially. So yeah, actually it does make a big difference in your life. Church is a huge drain on your life.
Well, there are several reasons why people become atheists.
No, there's one reason. They stopped believing in God. That's it. That's the whole thing. Nobody sat down and weighed the pros and cons of belief in a God as though it were simply a matter of choosing the most appealing belief system. They just don't believe anymore.
But one reason a lot of younger Americans are choosing to say that they are atheists is this reason. Because if there is no God, I can be my own God.
I know of zero atheists who think that they are their own God. The atheists that I know best are often some of the most humble people I've met. Now, do arrogant atheists exist? Of course they do. Do atheists with a God complex exist? Probably, but that's not the majority, not by a long shot.
If I can be my own God, I can live however I choose.
Those two don't necessarily flow from each other. I mean, yeah, if I am God, then yes, I can live however I choose. But there's also the fact that if there is no God enforcing any particular code of conduct, then I don't have to follow outdated codes of conduct laid down by people with demonstrably harmful moral systems.
And if I can live however I choose, you can't judge me because there's no God, there's no standard of judgment.
God does not automatically equal standard of judgment. Sure, I can judge you. What are the results of your actions? Do you have a positive or negative impact on those around you? That's the standard. Actual outcomes. Not pretend outcomes that happen after you die. Actual, real, measurable outcomes.
So I'm going to do what I want to do and you can't tell me it's wrong.
It depends entirely on what you're referring to here. Do you want to try pegging with your wife? Go for it. Have fun. I do not want to see it or hear any details about it, but it's not wrong. You want to ban abortions? Well, now we've reached territory in which you are having an impact on other people's lives. Now, let's ignore the main thrust of the abortion argument here. It is about bodily autonomy. But let's set that aside and pretend that a blastocyst is an independent individual person. If your goal is to avoid killing them, then you should be against restricting access to abortions, because it is a fact that the highest abortion rates are found in areas with the highest restrictions on abortions. So if you actually have a goal of preventing abortions, then the best way to accomplish that goal is through comprehensive sex education, not through abortion restrictions. Because when restrictions are in place, they do not decrease in number, but they do decrease in safety. So now you've not only increase the number of abortions that are likely to be performed, but have also increased the number of people who will suffer through complications caused by unsafe abortions. So, pro-life or pro-choice, it doesn't matter. If the goal is actually to preserve life and prevent abortions, then they should be easily accessible along with family planning resources. So by measuring outcomes, I am able to say here that restricting access to abortion is wrong.
And more young adults in America are buying into this belief. Well, that has cultural results we're seeing in our country. You have confusion. If there's no right and wrong, well then people aren't sure about their identity.
You're right. I really don't know who I am as a person because I'm free to murder whoever I want. Except I'm not really because, laws are a thing.
Am I male or am I a female?
Oh, even better. I don't know whether I'm male or female because I'm free to murder whoever I want. How are these two things even tied together in your head? Now, for me, this is one of those measurable outcomes things. Does being trans hurt anyone? No. Does being anti-trans hurt anyone? Yes, very much so. The research is quite clear. The more supportive the community around a trans individual, the better the outcomes. Add medical treatment to it, and it gets even better. Long term, after getting gender-affirming surgery, every year sees an 8% reduction in the likelihood that they will need mental health treatment.
They're not sure about what marriage is. Is it a man and a man or a woman and a woman? What is marriage?
Marriage is the legally or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship. That's not confusing, and the genders of the two people are completely irrelevant. If the idea of a man marrying another man is distasteful to you, then I have some good news for you. You don't have to marry another man. You are free to marry a woman. Who you marry is your business, not mine. Likewise, who other people choose to marry is their business, not yours. So who is more confused about marriage? The people that recognize that it's a personal decision and is therefore up to the individual person to decide for themselves? Or the people who think that if two men or two women are allowed to get married somewhere, that will somehow have an impact on their own marriage?
There's a lot of confusion. What is a family?
A group of one or more parents and their children living together as a unit. At least that's the definition that I think is relevant here. If you'd like a more broad definition, then all the descendants of a common ancestor fits the bill.
How should a government function?
Well, that one does get confusing, but it's not confusing because of atheism, it's confusing because people are complicated, and a government is made up of a bunch of complicated people with a diversity of opinions on how it should function. And this goes for any form of government, even a dictatorship. A dictator still needs underlings, and the underlings are not going to agree with the dictator all of the time, even if they do have to keep their disagreements to themselves for fear of their lives. What I hear you saying here is that you think things would be so much easier if we would all just run the government the way you want it to be run. And that's kind of scary, to be honest.
What's a society really all about?
Intercourse. No, really, I mean that. That's not a dirty joke. Intercourse is communication or dealings between individuals or groups, and that is literally what a society is all about. But also, intercourse.
And so you have a lot of confusion going on. When you have that going on, you have crumbling.
If you experience crumbling after intercourse, please see your doctor.
Right now in America, we have a deconstruction of all the foundational things that make our society a society that has worked.
Periodic deconstruction and reconstruction is a good thing. Depending on how you define worked, society worked when it was running on the feudal system. But through several deconstructions and reconstructions, we now have several countries running on variations of democracy, which seems to be one of the better systems of government thus far. But it is still rather young. Monarchies were the name of the game for thousands of years. Modern democracy has only been around for a few hundred. But the advantage of democracy is that it has built-in mechanisms for achieving these necessary changes. So you don't need to completely destabilize society in order to accomplish these changes. So when it came time to end slavery, that could be accomplished without violent revolution. Or rather, it was in a lot of places. It could have been in the US, but you know.
We have a deconstruction of our individual identity.
Nobody is forcing you to deconstruct your identity. A lot of people refer to the process of reevaluating their religious beliefs as deconstruction, where they question different parts of their faith individually, and often these people find the answers to be rather insufficient, so after a deconstruction, there isn't much left of the religious belief to reconstruct. But this is a personal quest that you don't have to go through yourself, though honestly, if you really believe in Christianity, you should want everyone to go through this process, because if it's true, then questioning the individual parts of faith should always lead one back to Christianity. The fact that it does not is apparently scary to you. Maybe you should deconstruct that feeling, figure out why you're scared of people questioning things.
Our genders, people are confused. They don't know if they're a male or a female or what they are.
Most people do know. The vast majority of people know. I know that I am a man. Most people are cis, and so identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. And most trans people are not confused about what gender they are. They know what gender they are, it just doesn't necessarily match up with what they were assigned at birth. Any confusion about gender usually lies in an insistence that trans people don't exist. So when a trans person is raised in an environment that denies the existence of trans people, it ends up rather confusing for them. So once again, the confusion lies on your side of the table.
They're confused. and the sense of identity is crumbling. Marriage is crumbling.
How exactly is marriage crumbling? I got married to my wife in a non-gay marriage on the exact day on which same-sex marriage was legalized in Canada. Did the fact that many gay couples got married on the same day do anything to delegitimize my marriage? No. In fact, until this moment, I didn't even realize that we got married on such a significant day. So 16 years now we've been married, and all the same-sex couples married for the same length of time have had zero impact on our relationship.
What is marriage? A man with a man, a woman with a woman, a human with an animal?
Who is advocating for humans marrying animals, Dave? Why do you assume that this is where it will all lead, Dave? Canada has had same-sex marriage nationally since 2005, and since 2003 on a provincial level, and I am not aware of anyone even attempting to put forth any legislation regarding the marriage of animals, Dave.
It's being redefined. The true biblical definition of marriage is crumbling.
I mean, the true biblical definition of marriage is one man and as many women as he can afford to keep, and the women get little say in the matter, usually being sold to the man by their fathers or being captured in a military conquest. Also, concubines were a thing that the Bible never explicitly condemned. I mean, it's certainly heavily implied that such practices were frowned on in the New Testament, but the Old Testament only seems to have a problem with such practices if the women involved are foreign, because miscegenation is a bad thing, I guess, according to the Bible. Great moral book you've got there.
What's a family? A committed husband and wife raising children.
Children, who are often talked about in the Bible as though they are completely replaceable. That's how Job's story ends. After all of his kids die and he endures his trials, God rewards him by replacing his kids. And the whole sacrificing of Isaac thing seems to place a weird emphasis on the fact that Isaac is Abraham's only son, as though it wouldn't be as big of a deal if he had other kids. Which he actually did. That story seems to have forgotten about Ishmael. And let's not forget Jephthah's daughter. That story goes out of its way to point out that she is his only child. Anytime something like this happens to a child, it always makes a big deal about the ones that are the only child, almost like that's worse than losing just one of many children. Oh, also, if you have a child with your wife's slave, that counts as her child, like you were just borrowing the slave's uterus. And also, if your brother dies without having kids, his wife is not your wife now, but it is your duty to impregnate her. Oh, and also, the original engagement ring, according to the Bible, was actually a nose ring. So that's fun. You know what they say about girls with nose rings.
Or now, is it 2 men and a child, or 2 women and a child? What is a family?
Sure, those can be families. Why not?
That's being redefined. Traditional family is being attacked, and it's crumbling.
The traditional family, as laid out by the Bible, is a gross, misogynistic, patriarchal system that treats women just slightly better than it treats slaves. It doesn't even come close to reflecting what most modern Christians think of when they hear the words traditional marriage or traditional family. So why do you advocate for this specific type of family unit when the Bible doesn't even advocate for that?
How's a government supposed to work? Who's supposed to have authority and tell me what to do?
Well, according to the Bible, that's actually not really any of your concern. You just have to do it. Romans 13 is quite clear that God puts the authorities in power. They have no power except for God, so you must submit to them. So to complain about the government is to complain about the choices that God has made and who should be governing.
And so there's a lot of crumbling, and that results in a lot of conflict. We have protest. We have rebellion.
The right to peacefully protest is one of the primary mechanisms by which change is achieved. And as long as we're talking about rebellion, there were an awful lot of Christian flags and symbolism at the Capitol building on January 6th. Just saying.
And we have this sense that I can be my own God, And so I'm going to do what I want to do. And if you try to tell me it's wrong, you're wrong, and we're going to have conflict.
Isn't that just typical? The apologist whining about other people being given equal rights blames the people who currently don't have equal rights for wanting equal rights. There wouldn't be any conflict if they would just shut up and accept their place as not deserving the same basic human dignity as I get. Why do they have to cause so much conflict? Look in a mirror, Dave.
Well, there's also personal results of atheism, and these are very serious. One is emptiness.
I had a big lunch today, so I actually am rather full at the moment.
We understand that God created all of us with a God-shaped void in our lives. We have a God-shaped hole. And no one but God, nothing but God can fill that hole.
I feel like you just need to try a bigger butt plug. Eventually you get used to it, and the bigger ones can do a better job of filling these God-shaped holes. They even make God-shaped ones if you like, but this video is already skirting pretty close to the monetization edge, so I'm not going to show a picture of that. You can Google that for yourself if you really want to.
Alcohol, drugs, sex, money, power, nothing can fill that hole.
I'm not a big drinker, I don't sleep around, I have enough money to get by, but I don't have enough to fix the driveway, or the leaky garage roof, or our stupid-ass kitchen cupboards where some idiot thought it was a good idea to build the two biggest cupboards right beside the stove area with the doors opening into the side of the stove, or more likely that some idiot thought of installing a stove in a spot that blocks the two biggest cupboards was a good idea. So that's almost a third of our cupboard space in the kitchen that's completely unusable without extensive renovations to move the stove to a different part of the kitchen. Okay, that's my irrelevant rant for the day. I'm done. I don't do drugs. I have basically zero power, though certainly YouTubers smaller than me have gone on power trips in the past, but they almost always make themselves look really bad when they do that, because YouTubers don't actually have a lot of real power. At least not the little ones like me. Steve from Gamers Nexus, though, he's got the power to make Gigabyte regret not issuing a recall for their explodey power supplies. Now that's power! Anyway, yeah, I don't even try to fill my hole with any of this stuff. So what does that mean? I'm happy with my life. I'm satisfied. I am content. I'd be more content if I had a secret staircase leading up to an attic bedroom hidden by a bookshelf door. Is that my God hole? Can I fill my God-shaped hole with the hidden doors and secret passages?
But we live in a society that says there is no God.
No, society is still very much on God's side. I mean, you're all worried about the government falling apart because of a lack of Christianity, but 88.1% of the current Congress is Christian of one flavor or another, with only one single member being religiously unaffiliated, maybe not even atheist. So that's 0.2% of Congress, representing 22% of the population. That's a bit skewed if you ask me.
So people are trying to fill that hole with everything but God, and it's not working.
Well, now you're just down a rabbit hole of unsubstantiated claims. You claim there is a God-shaped hole. What is your evidence? This is pure assertion. You claim that there is a God, that God leaves a God-shaped hole if we don't believe in him. What is your evidence for God? Thus far, your evidence seems to be the existence of the God-shaped hole, which was based entirely on assertion. So you have an assertion that a God exists, and you seem to have a complete lack of understanding of anything to do with atheism.
We have the highest rate of addiction we've ever had. We have more people dying of drug overdoses than we've ever had.
Yes, addiction and overdoses are more of a problem now than they have been in the past. But drug addiction is a complex beast, and there have been many factors at play. Religiosity is not one of the factors at play. In the US in particular, the profit-driven healthcare system in which doctors receive financial incentives for prescribing certain medications played a huge role when OxyContin was developed in the 90s, combined with a handful of inadequate studies that suggested that opioids were not addictive like was previously thought. But whatever else you can say about the cause of modern drug problems, one thing is certain: Europe is doing much better than the US is. Europe is also typically a lot less religious than the US, so drug addiction and overdoses do not correlate with religiosity at all.
We have the highest rate of suicide, the highest rate of depression.
Suicide rates have only just in the last couple of years gotten higher than they were in 1977, and in the US they were on a sharp decline throughout the 1990s while the opioid crisis was taking off. So you have to choose here. If you want one of these to be tied to rising atheism, you can't have the other one tied to rising atheism because they don't correlate with each other. Though really it's not about choosing if we actually care about data, it's about seeing which one matches the data. And it's neither. Neither matches the data.
There's going to be emptiness. If you choose to live without God, you're choosing a life of inner emptiness.
The times I felt the most dejected and empty in my life were the times when I was Christian and doing things that Christians are not supposed to do, but are actually healthy and normal activities, like masturbation. Since letting go of God, I've had a much more fulfilling life without having to feel guilt or shame for these healthy and normal things.
Second, you're choosing a life of eternal separation. You see, if you don't want God in this life, you will not have God in the next life.
Believe me, or you'll regret it when you're dead. That's what you're saying here. Bring evidence to the table or get out. The Muslims agree that non-believers will not go to heaven. How do I, a non-believer in both religions, decide which one to believe? If I'm going purely by the claims of what will happen after death without evidence, the decision is impossible.
And that's a terrible decision because God is love.
God is love, but he'll burn you forever if you don't love him back. Okay, yeah, Dave seems to be more of an eternal separation type Christian, so maybe he doesn't believe in the torture part and is of the opinion that separation from God is the real torture. It's a torture of wanting to be with someone that you just can't be with. Well, if God knows that that is what's coming, then he can't be all-loving because he doesn't reveal himself to everyone in a way that will cause them to believe in him without question. Because a loving God would do everything in his power to avoid that negative outcome, and since he is all-powerful, that means that a belief in him shouldn't be a matter of choice. We should all just believe. And this doesn't affect free will. Satan knows for sure that God exists, and he still chooses to disobey. So free will does not save this argument. The fact that atheists exist is a demonstration that either the God of the Bible does not exist, or at the very least is not all-loving.
God is light. God is life. God gives joy. God is the God of peace.
God of peace? The guy who drowned everyone in the world? The guy who ordered several genocides? The guy who, in a book that is supposed to be his word, had written, "Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rock"? That guy is a God of peace? Oh, but that's the Old Testament. Violence was necessary back then sometimes, and for some reason God was powerless to make it unnecessary. Okay, Jesus said in Matthew 10:34, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." And then he went on to list all the people that he's going to set against each other. Some God of peace.
God is the God of hope. God is the God of truth.
The God of truth has a history of deceiving and lying to people. Seems like this God is the God of double standards if he's the God of anything.
Do you want to live your life without any of those things? Do you want to live your eternity without any of those things?
Given God's history of not actually providing those things and often directly fighting against them, I don't really think that your God is the path to obtaining those things.
Because if you tell God to push off in this life, God will not force you to spend eternity with him. In fact, you have chosen to spend eternity without him in darkness.
God didn't send you to hell. You chose to go there yourself by not believing in him without there being convincing evidence. Great.
Hey, there is a God. He's real. There's evidence for God. He loves you. He sent his son to die for you.
Is that supposed to be the evidence? Because that sounds an awful lot like another claim that needs evidence to support it, rather than it being supporting evidence of the God claim.
I encourage you, open your mind, study the truth, and get to know the real and living God.
I did that, and the response I got from God was indistinguishable from what it would have been if God did not exist. So I no longer believe that God exists, since he behaves in a way that is identical to how a non-existent God would behave. That's it for this one. Today's comment of the day comes to us from Rob Jackson, who says, I'm curious, have any miracles in history ever been proven to have been miracles? And I may not understand the science, but I know there is enough evidence to say that creationists are wrong. Well, with regards to the miracles, the Catholic Church has a vested interest in proving miracles, because in order for someone to be canonized as a saint, they have to have 2 verified posthumous miracles attributed to them. So if we look at a list of the top 10 miracles of the Catholic Church, as compiled by a Catholic organization, we find that the number 1 spot, their best miracle, is the miracle of the sun, in which a few thousand people who were expecting to see an apparition of the Virgin Mary stared directly into the sun and saw some weird stuff. Notably not the Virgin Mary, just stuff like the sun flickering and going all rainbowy and moving and stuff. You know, the kind of thing that you're likely to see if you stare directly into the sun. Also, the kids that predicted that Mary would appear on the 13th of October had been predicting that about the 13th of every month for 6 prior months to that one. October's just the one that gained traction for whatever reason. And also, Mary was supposed to bring peace to the world, and World War I lasted for another 13 months. And this is the best evidenced miracle that they can come up with. So to answer your question, no. No miracle has ever been demonstrated to be miraculous in any way, shape, or form. Thanks for watching. Special thanks as always to my patrons, Mark McManus, Mark Hetcham, Clench Eastwood, Lynn Dobbs, What Jesus, and all the rest, who are the plugs that fill the patron-shaped hole in my heart. If you'd like to provide me with ongoing care for the serious condition of having heart holes, you can join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per week over at patreon.com/ViceRhino. I don't really have heart holes. Please don't give me money thinking that it's for medical stuff. If you feel so inclined, you can also support the channel through direct donation or my Amazon wishlist, which are linked in the description. If you'd like to listen to my videos in podcast form or listen to my podcast with my daughter, the links for those are also in the description, as well as links to my social media accounts and my P.O. Box address. See you next time!